day. The term next gen is thrown around all the time these days. Dark Souls 3 is the next gen Dark Souls. The new Kabadoobie is the next gen Kabadoobie. But really, these days, next gen is pretty much meaningless. From the Xbox 360 to the Xbone, there wasn't altogether that many changes. But back in the 1990s, ladies and gentlemen, next gen actually meant something. When the 90s started out, the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo led the pack in terms of consoles. But then, in 1999, you had the Sega Dreamcast. The Sega Dreamcast was the first of the 6th generation of consoles, and was supposed to revitalize Sega after the rather lackluster performance of the Sega Saturn. The Dreamcast was notable for using off-the-shelf components to keep the cost of the units down, and to make development a little bit easier. The system also utilized a new type of disc as well, the GD-ROM, or Gigabyte ROM. This would not be all that amazing, as many Dreamcast games could simply be run off of CDRs. The Dreamcast had massive hype built for it, and when it was finally released, it garnered a great deal of popularity, and by the end of 1999, the Dreamcast held 60% of the market share of the video game consoles in North America. But like with the Genesis in the early 90s, it would lose the console war after a challenger came onto the field. This challenger was not Nintendo, however, rather it was the mighty PlayStation 2. The PS2 was more powerful, and it could of course play the then new format of DVD, and in short order killed the Dreamcast, and also spelled the end of Sega being hardware manufacturers. Now today, we're going to take a look at the most popular and highest selling game for the Dreamcast, Sonic Adventure. But before we get into that game, let's first take a look at the 3 mainline Sonic games that preceded it. First, we must go back to the beginning to truly understand the Sonic story. Sega brought its Genesis to America to compete not with the SNES, but rather the NES, as the Sega Genesis actually predates the SNES by several years. In the early years of the Genesis, Sonic was not even a thing. It would not be until 1990 that a search for a new mascot was undertaken, as prior to this, the character of Alex Kidd was Sega's mascot, and you can see how well that worked out, as very few non-hardcore gamers even know who he is. So, in 1990, Sega ordered its in-house development studio, AM8, to create a game featuring a new mascot. It would be Naoto Oshima who would come up with the idea of a hedgehog, and according to Wikipedia, later stated that he put Felix the Cat's head on Mickey Mouse's body. And ironically enough, Sonic is likely more popular than either one of those characters these days. Sonic's initial coloration was supposed to be teal, but this would be changed to the more normal blue. And you will never guess where his red shoes came from. Are you ready for this? Now, all this comes from Wikipedia, but apparently his red shoes come from both Michael Jackson's boots that were seen on the album cover for Bad, and also Santa Claus, as Naoto felt that Santa was the most famous character in the world. And well, he is not off the mark for that. So, Santa Sonic Jackson actually had a few other weird elements as well early on that were all, thankfully, scrapped. He was supposed to have been in a rock band, although how you would have got that across in a 16-bit game I do not know, and he was supposed to have had a human girlfriend as well. This, of course, would be kind of seen later in Sonic 06, but thankfully it was not seen in Sonic 1. Sega of America also wanted Sonic to not be a hedgehog at all, as they feared that Americans would not know what one was. Although, Sonic has about as much to do with real hedgehogs as Mario has to do with real plumbers. Sonic would of course become amazingly popular and ensure that Sega could maintain their side of the console war, and in 1992 they would release a sequel that would go on to become the most popular standalone Genesis game of all time. Sonic 2 would improve upon all aspects of Sonic 1. The graphics are sharper, the music is better, and you get a new character, Miles Tails Prower. The game would set the course for the early Sonic series and would start the trend of each consecutive Sonic game being bigger and more complex. Sonic 3 would be released in 1994 and would be the biggest Sonic game yet. It would feature bigger and way more complex levels, even better graphics, and a whole new character in the guise of Knuckles. The game was so big, in fact, that you needed 2 cartridges to play the bloody thing. The music was also more complex as well, and apparently was even worked on by the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. Sadly, today at least, we are not taking a look at the original Dreamcast version of Sonic Adventure. Why, you may ask? Because I can neither find it nor my Dreamcast. And when I opened up the box that I thought it was in, it wasn't there. even though it was a bit of a tease. One of my Dreamcast controllers was at the very top of the box that I opened, but the Dreamcast was nowhere to be found. Rather, in its place, I found its arch nemesis, the PS2. Now, today, we're taking a look at the PC version of Sonic Adventure, called Sonic Adventure DX. Now, this version is just a port and not a graphical update, so it is indeed representative of the original Dreamcast version. So with that, let's activate the game and take a look. Graphically, the game was simply amazing. Now, while we are looking at the PC version, and thus it looks slightly better than its Dreamcast counterpart, it does not look so much better that it's not representative of the impact that the Dreamcast's graphics had on the gaming public at the time. While these graphics, even in their best PC form, might have aged today, in 1999, they would have been something that most of the gaming public would have found impossibly advanced. Now remember, this is 1999 we are talking about, and if you played Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991, then this is the level of graphical advancement that you would have seen. Now that's a pretty bloody big difference, isn't it? And remember, Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 1991, Sonic Adventure 1999, a mere 8-year difference. Really, the graphics for the game at this time at least were nothing short of jaw-dropping. Now, prior to this, you had various 3D games that looked pretty good. You had Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, Super Mario 64, but now things looked far less blocky, and things were actually animated. Whatever next? Cities actually look like cities, and things actually look like things. And the game was simply next gen in terms of visuals. In the modern era, this game still looks pretty good. Sure, the texture work is dated and animations are simple to say the least, but it does hold up, although the facial animations are really quite hilarious. Hey, it makes it easier to sync up the English and Japanese dialogue. This is a game that looks less like a game from 1999 and more like a game from the 2000s. Gameplay for Sonic Adventure is both excellent and next-gen! Instead of just playing as Sonic in this game, you instead have several characters you can choose from. You've got Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, E102 Gamma, and last but certainly least, Big the Cat. And when I first played the game, the only character I wanted to play as was Ed209. Really, he is a bloody awesome robot. Sadly, you cannot just play as whatever character you want when you first start the game. Rather, you must unlock these characters as you play the game. And it takes a hell of a long time to unlock Ed209. The only character you can play as when you first start the game is, appropriately enough, Sonic. The game itself is divided into action stages and adventure stages. The action stages are third-person 3D platforming stages, and the adventure stages are where you adventure, and I do use that term loosely, as the adventure stages are rather small and it's fairly obvious where to go. Each of the action stages will play differently depending on which character you're playing as. Sonic plays as you would expect and is a great jump to 3D, and most of the game's best levels are found in his storyline. My favorite stage by far is the Egg Carrier. As a futuristic space one, it can carry a whole baker's dozen rather than a mere plebeian dozen. The Egg Carrier is bloody brilliant, with all sorts of moving bits and bobs and things of that nature. There are perspective changes and all sorts of really cool elements. And unlike many of the other stages, it's actually pretty challenging, and it was in this bloody level that I actually lost most of my lives, because of course Sonic Adventure has the annoying live system. Why wouldn't it? One final thing to mention about the Sonic levels is the fact that Sonic can grab on these rather inexplicable rockets that propel him to other areas of the level. They are really cool, but I want to know who put these here? Robotnik? Sonic himself? Sega? I want logic, damn it! How dare you ask me to have fun? The Tails stages are basically the same as the Sonic stages, but here you can fly, and most of the time you're racing against Sonic. Then you have the Knuckles stages, and he can fly about and reach areas Sonic cannot, and his main objective in his levels is to collect 3 certain items. You then have the character of Amy. Who in the name of Ysmir is Amy? Why, she's the pink Sonic from Sonic CD, of course. Really, she's one of the most well-known Sonic characters of all. Her stages are built around a slower platforming experience, and she's actually armed with a weapon, a subspace hammer weapon, that she can use to fight the various enemies with. You then have my main man, the dude, the great one, Ed209. His stages are a bloody tease though. Each stage is timed, and while you can of course extend the time limits in various ways, these stages never go on long enough, and his overall plotline is over very quickly. He is armed with a machine gun that he uses to shoot the crap out of enemies with. You really do have to feel sorry for the citizens of Station Square. I mean, Sonic, I get, and all his friends are okay. I mean, they're not that bad, they can make some degree of logical sense. But then they have to deal with a giant talking purple cat with a fishing pole that is also apparently super strong, so strong in fact that he can lift cars. It's just these people never bat an eyelash at the strangeness of it all. I think I would emote a little bit at a giant talking super strong purple cat. What, wouldn't you draw the line at that? The ridiculousness of Big the Cat aside, his gameplay is also a bit idiotic as it's fishing. Yeah, who wouldn't want to play Sonic's fly fishing adventure? The Big the Cat levels were dull in the 90s, and they are dull now. They're not broken in any way, it's just bloody boring. It's fishing, the slowest, most agonizing sport known to man, in a game that is supposed to be all about speed. One of the complaints about the game in the past and today was the camera. It's kind of crap and is nowhere near as good as the Super Mario 64 camera. Sometimes it points at walls, and sometimes it just refuses to let you see where you're going, as it likes to point behind you when you walk forward. With the Xbox 360 controller, you can rotate the camera with the shoulder buttons, but even then, this helps only so much. The rest of the game controls well enough, and it controls even better with an original Dreamcast controller, as the 360 stick just never seems to work all that well when you're trying to hit certain hairpin turns. Overall, the gameplay is pretty damn good, and the various characters, sans Big the Cat, really give the game some variety and help it not become stale. The boss fights for the game are really bloody easy. Hell, most of the time, they're so easy that you can defeat bosses in about 5 bloody seconds. Oh yes, I almost forgot. You have the Chow raising minigame. How do you spell that? I don't know. I will be honest, as a kid, I never messed with it. And in the modern era, I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I will cover the basics here. Essentially, you can raise a cute little creature and you can race them, and there's all sorts of piddly crap. For the Dreamcast version, it was so you could actually play a game on the memory unit called the VMU. That was one element of the Dreamcast that was really a great deal of tryhard. Essentially, think of a memory card with a screen and controls that cost an arm and a leg. Hell, for the longest time I played Sonic Adventure without one and had to leave the console on overnight, and then there would be times when a family member would turn it off thinking I'd forgotten to turn it off myself, meaning I became rather well acquainted with the first few levels of this game. Back to the Chows though. You can raise them on the VMU if you so choose, and I kinda tried that back in the 90s for a grand total of 2 seconds and then forgot all about it. It's not a badly designed minigame, just one that I personally never cared about. This is a game where just about every track is memorable in some way. This is a game where even the lowest quality track would be considered another game's best. This is a game where no matter how long it's been since one played it, one will always remember its various musical tracks. And hell, each time I come back to the game, I cannot help but smile each time I hear the Station Square theme. Each character gets their own theme song, and these themes will play in cutscenes. And I know it's a small element, but I feel it really gives the game character. Modern day games are just so serious to the point where having a theme song play when a popular character shows up is considered the height of cheesiness. Here, however, it fits perfectly with the fun-loving atmosphere of the game. It's just cool to have a character show up and have a recognizable theme start playing. Here is an example.
E-102, codename Gamma. Gamma.
Oh, the voice acting, ladies and gentlemen. It is excellent. It is right on par with the Resident Evil 1 voice acting, and I would say it's actually even more entertaining than Resident Evil 1's voice acting. And you just have to listen to some of the greatest lines ever heard in a video game.
Sonic! We can't let him get away with this, can we?
No way, Tails!
Ah, look! Eggman's robot's on the loose!
Don't panic! I'll handle that bag of bolts!
Ah!
Now what's wrong?
Uh-oh, what's this? No! Ah!
Truly, these were some of the greatest actors of their generation. However, I will give props to the Dr. Eggman actor. He really does turn in a legitimately good performance. If his lines had sucked, his character would have truly suffered for it. Really, by far the worst voice in the game is Big the Cat. Yes, like with his stages, Big the Cat sucks in terms of voice acting as well. It's not funny or entertaining, it's just annoying. Have a listen.
Oh man, where could my Pollywog pal be anyway?
Who could have possibly delivered a line performance that bad? I mean, who voiced this purple abomination? John St. John?
I could do this all day.
Yes, according to the Sonic Wiki, John St. John had to voice Big the Cat. Damn you, Duke Nukem Forever, you took so bloody long to come out that John St. John had to play a talking purple cat to pay the bills. So what about the PC port? Because while I may be a big fan of the Sega Dreamcast, I still remain a member of the PC gaming master race. The PC port is not bad, and is certainly functional. You can play with a keyboard and mouse, and you can play with only a 360 controller. And the game plays well enough on the PC, but in its initial form, the frame rate is rather inconsistent. Sometimes you'll get 60 FPS, and then sometimes, for no reason at all, it dips to 40, and during cutscenes, it drops to 30. The joystick input is not all that good, and it's very hard to take tight corners. But in its base form, the PC port is still fun enough, and it actually functions. But a fan of mine, Miphiles, showed me a mod that fixes literally everything. And this mod is called Better Sonic Adventure DX and can be found by searching on Steam. Installation is extraordinarily easy. You just run a simple executable file and the mod installs. I got it working in literally 2 minutes. And when I say it improves everything, I mean it improves everything. No longer does the frame rate tank for absolutely no reason. No longer is the game in a letterbox, and you can actually rebind the controls. Whatever next? Ultimately, the fans did what developers didn't. And while I love the Dreamcast version, I will be honest and say that this is likely the single most definitive version of Sonic Adventure. One of the more notable aspects of Sonic Adventure is the fact that it actually has a story. Yes, indeed. Sonic Adventure has a story. This was rather surprising back in the day, especially since the other Sonic games had very little in terms of story in-game. When you first put in Sonic Adventure, you get a rather epic and oh so very 90s cutscene that kind of highlights the issue with Sonic Adventure's story. The first part of this intro works really well, and the sea monster looks really epic. Then there's a massive tone shift. Well, that rockin' track is an absolutely epic 90s high five. Sonic honestly just seems kinda out of place in his own game. The cutscene begins with some realistic imagery that would not be out of place in an FPS or third-person game, and then Sonic comes running in and completely changes the whole mood. I'm not saying that Sonic should not be in his own game, I'm just saying it's a little weird. The story for Sonic Adventure was, and still is in many respects, complex. I didn't say good, as in it's subtly nuanced and well plotted out, rather it's complex. With a great deal of character interaction and so much cheese that a Wisconsinite would tell them to tone it down a bit. So the game starts up with Sonic superheroing his way to the game's principal setting of Station Square, a rather incongruous town that seems ill-placed in the Sonic universe. But like with many things, the game just tells you to shut up and have fun. Sonic shows up and does battle with Chaos Zero. Blood for the Blood God! Count the 7. Just as planned! Chaos Zero here is a water blob monster thing that Sonic easily defeats, like with all the other bosses in the game. Chaos here shows up all throughout the game, and the basic plot for Sonic and Tails is that they must stop Robotnik from collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, because if he gets them all, he will be able to power up Chaos to become Chaos Undivided, and thus, with such a powerful piece of warpcraft, Robotnik will be able to smite the corpse-worshipping Dinsians of Station Square, and in its place create a monument for the 4 gods of the warp, a place called Robotopulus. Now, if you were like me, you would have absolutely no idea that Chaos Emeralds actually dated from the earlier Sonic games. The archenemy Emeralds date all the way back to Sonic 1. Not that Sonic 1 ever tells you that the Chaos Emeralds are even in the game. To get them in that game, you have to go into a special stage, search around in that stage, and then while not hitting the exit, break into this area, get the emerald, and even after that, you don't really know what it's for, or even if it's important. Sonic 3 shows the emeralds up front when Knuckles straight up steals them from you, but even then, it's not like the game tells you that they're actually important. And Knuckles does the same bloody thing in this game. His plotline starts up with him on an island guarding the Imkron Crystal. And no, that's not what it's called. Essentially, the crystal breaks, the island falls into the ocean, and then Knuckles must find all the crystal slivers. Also, it seems that he landed on his head because Robotnik is able to convince him that Sonic is after the crystal slivers. And from my research, Knuckles was an idiot in Sonic 3 because in that game, Robotnik, the clearly evil guy, was also able to convince him to turn against Sonic. I mean, just look at all it takes for Robotnik here to dupe Knuckles into actually serving his own purposes.
He's after the pieces of the Master Emerald too!
What do you mean?
You're not the only one on a wild goose chase, idiot! Why should I ruin your surprise?
Truly a Mensa-level intellect there. You then have Amy. She just sort of wanders into the plot. The game shows that she has returned from being a pink Sonic, I guess, and is living in Station Square lamenting that the days of adventure are long past. I personally rather like it when a sequel actually acknowledges a passing of time, as it makes the story that much more satisfying. She gets roped into the plot when the Twitter bird is problematically attacked by a sexist robot. She of course tries to aid the bird, but then needs to be rescued by Sonic. She is kind of an annoying character, but at times she can be at least a little endearing. She plays a role in Ed 209's plot. Essentially, Ed 209 wants the problematic Twitter bird because it has a Chaos Emerald, and apparently Amy has a massively high charisma skill because this is all it takes to convince Ed 209 to let them go.
I pity you. Love is not part of your programming. You are missing something good. Hey, Birdie, come back here!
Go. Escape.
Now if she and Kirk teamed up, the Necrons wouldn't stand a chance! Ed 209's plot is as you would expect. He starts out as a loyal battle droid working for Robotnik, and is easily convinced to change sides, and thus he tries to free his fellow robot friends. His plotline is by far my favorite overall, and actually has some really emotional moments to it. Big the cat just wants his pet frog back. Moving on, one final story bit I want to harp on is Tails. He creates a plane that uses a Chaos Emerald for a power source, and here's what he says about it.
Check out this power supply!
It's a Chaos Emerald! No way!
I was lucky to find one of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. They have unlimited mystic powers. Now I want to harness that power to fly my plane.
So, yeah. He has a unlimited power source that could literally change the world with its clean energy. And what does he use it for? He uses it to power a bloody biplane! Ultimately, the story like the game itself can be summed up in one word: sincere. The game feels sincere, and as a player back in the 90s and today, I feel that the developers put in a sincere amount of effort to create the very best possible Sonic they could. And this is one of many classic games that shows what developers can do when they give a damn about a game and give it their all. As you would expect, that despite all its flaws, the game got a considerable amount of popularity and gained widespread acceptance across the gaming community. Sonic Adventure 2 would be released in 2001 and would become marginally successful, but in a far too short period of time, the Dreamcast was, shall we say, put to pasture by the might of the monolith that was and is the PlayStation 2. And Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 would later be ported to that console, and several others as well. And of course later, the PC. The Sonic series continues on even to this day, with Sonic getting some good releases like Colors and Generations, and some crappy releases like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic 06, aka the crappy third installment of the Adventure series. And it's rather notable all around that despite Sonic's age, he is still going strong with absolutely no end in sight. So here's the big question: is Sonic Adventure actually worth playing in the modern era? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's actually held up better than I initially thought. Initially, I thought this would just be a game that I would primarily be nostalgic for, but as I replayed it, on the PC at least, I found it to be absolutely amazing and found myself having a great deal of fun with it. It's so unlike modern games these days that it actually has a really fun and fun-loving atmosphere. It's not serious, most of the time at least, and it doesn't get bloody political as every bloody thing has to these days. It's just a video game, and it's fun to actually play a video game. So do I recommend it? Absolutely. When you can get it really cheap on a Steam sale, I highly recommend checking it out. Because if you give it a chance, you might find yourself just about having fun. And so, I am Generallotz, wishing you good Sonic Colors, and good Sonic Adventure 2, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed my review of Sonic Adventure, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon, so that I can continue to bring you these awesome game reviews.